I was watching my favorite TV show when my son-in-law walked over and turned it off. "You're wasting your life on this garbage," he said mockingly. My daughter stood silently beside him, not saying a word. I quietly stood up and went upstairs. 3 days later, when they came home from work, they started pounding on the door and shouting nonstop. His key no longer opened the door, and I stood inside holding 3 sets of evidence files. I am deeply grateful that you are here. Before we continue, please let me know where you're watching from, your city, your country, even the current time where you are. I truly enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with people all around the world. Before we move forward, just a brief note. This story contains fictional details created for dramatic and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals or real settings is purely unintentional. The cable went slack in Trevor's hand and my television screen died mid-sentence. I'd been sitting on my worn leather couch, nursing a cup of chamomile tea and watching my favorite show. October light slanted through the bay window, the maple trees outside just starting to turn crimson and gold. It was my Friday afternoon ritual, an hour of quiet before dinner, a small piece of peace in a house that no longer felt entirely mine. Trevor stood between me and the television, the black cable dangling from his fist like a dead snake. "You're wasting your life on this garbage, Diane," he said. "Not mom, never mom. Always my first name, flat and dismissive, as if I were a student who'd failed to turn in homework. Sitting here day after day, rotting your brain." I felt heat rise in my cheeks, a flush of humiliation I hadn't experienced since childhood. I'd taught English literature for 35 years at Richmond High, guided hundreds of teenagers through Shakespeare and Steinbeck, served on curriculum committees, mentored new teachers. I'd spent decades shaping young minds. And here was this 37-year-old man who couldn't hold down a real job calling me wasteful. "I was watching that," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. "Yeah, well, you watch too much TV." He tossed the cable onto the coffee table with a careless flick of his wrist. "Melissa and I are going out. Don't wait up." He walked away before I could respond. His footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. Vincent and I had refinished together the year before he got sick. Each footfall felt like a small invasion, a reminder that this house, my house, was no longer entirely under my control. Vincent, my husband, the history teacher who'd made the Civil War feel alive in classrooms that smelled like old textbooks and teenage energy. When the doctors gave us the diagnosis, he'd smiled that sad, knowing smile and said, "Well, at least I got to teach history. Now I'll be part of it." We'd laughed through our tears that day, holding hands in a sterile oncology office. He passed 5 years ago last April. 5 years of learning to sleep alone in a bed meant for 2, to fix the leaky faucet myself, to live in a house that echoed with memories, but no longer with laughter. And then last spring, Melissa had shown up with Trevor and 4 suitcases. "Just for a little while, Mom," she'd set her voice bright, but her eyes tired. "Trevor's between consulting gigs and our lease is up. We'll be out by summer, I promise." That was April. This was October. 8 months of Trevor's comments. 8 months of watching my daughter, my bright, confident elementary school teacher daughter, shrink into someone I barely recognized. She'd stopped calling her friends, stopped going to her book club, started flinching when Trevor raised his voice, her shoulders hunching forward as if bracing for impact. And I'd said nothing. I'd told myself it wasn't my business, that Melissa was 36, an adult capable of making her own decisions, that every marriage had rough patches, that outsiders shouldn't interfere. But sitting there, staring at the blank screen, Vincent's voice came back to me, something he used to say when we'd notice a student changing, withdrawing, becoming a shadow of themselves. When someone tries to control the small things, they're hiding something big. Always. You just have to dig. Trevor had been controlling the small things for months, criticizing what I watched, what I cooked, how I kept my own house, telling me when to turn off lights, when to go to bed, what groceries to buy. And Melissa had stopped fighting back, had stopped defending me, had stopped being herself. What was he hiding? The question settled in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold. I stood. My knees creaked. 64 years will do that, but my mind felt sharper than it had in months. Vincent had taught me to trust my instincts, to investigate, to look for evidence, to never ignore the warning signs. The house was quiet. Trevor and Melissa had left 10 minutes ago. They wouldn't be back for at least 2 hours. Trevor liked his dinners long and expensive, even when he wasn't paying. I walked down the hallway past the photos on the wall, Melissa's college graduation, Vincent and me on our 30th anniversary, the three of us at the Grand Canyon with the sun setting behind us. I stopped in front of the guest room door, their door now. My hand hovered over the brass knob, the same knob Vincent had installed when we'd renovated this room years ago, turning it from storage into a proper guest space. My heart pounded thick and urgent in my ears. My fingers trembled slightly. This was my house, my home. I had every right to open this door. But still I hesitated, because once I crossed this threshold, once I started looking, there would be no going back. Once I found something, and I was certain now that I would find something, everything would change. I thought of the black cable slack and dead on my coffee table. I thought of Melissa's silence, her flinching her fear. I thought of Vincent dig D, always dig. I took a deep breath, steadied my shaking hand, and tightened my grip on the doorknob. I turned it. The guest room smelled like Trevor's cologne, something sharp and expensive that didn't belong in a house that still held the faint scent of Vincent's old spice. It was nearly 11 at night. Through the half-open bathroom door, I could hear their breathing, Trevor's heavy snore, Melissa's soft rhythmic exhale. I'd waited hours. Waited through their return from dinner, through the clink of wine glasses in the kitchen, through the creak of bed springs as they settled. Now the house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the October wind rattling the windows. Trevor's laptop sat open on the desk, a silver Dell, its screen still glowing. He hadn't even locked it. I stepped closer, my slippers soundless on the old carpet. The screen showed his desktop folders labeled Consulting Projects and Client Proposals. I'd bet those were empty. Near the bottom was one called Financial_Personal. My hand trembled as I clicked it open. Inside was a single Excel file, cc_charges_2025.xlsx. The spreadsheet loaded and my breath caught in my throat. Row after row of charges, dates, amounts, merchant names. March 14th, 2025, Louis Vuitton Short Pump Town Center, $3,400. May 8th, 2025, Rolex Broad Street, $12,500. July 19, 2025, Morton Steakhouse, $890. August 3rd, 2025, Nordstrom Designer Suits, $2,750. On and on. 7 months' worth of luxury purchases, 5-star restaurants, designer clothes. At the bottom of the spreadsheet, a cell highlighted in yellow, total $52,800. $52,800. My credit card. My name. My account, the one Vincent and I had opened when we bought our first house 40 years ago. I scrolled to a second tab labeled Signatures. Scanned images of receipts. My signature on every one except it wasn't my signature. The loops were wrong, the slant too aggressive. Trevor had forged my name $52,000 worth. My vision blurred. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Then I saw the Gmail icon blinking at the bottom of the screen. I clicked. The inbox opened. I scrolled past spam until I saw a name that stopped me cold. Andrea Patterson, Meadowbrook Senior Living. I opened the first email, dated October 10th, 2025, 8 days ago. Andrea, thanks for the consultation. Meadowbrook looks perfect private room memory care wing. My mother-in-law is declining fast. She's not, but doctors will confirm whatever I need. Timeline end of November. Once she's placed, the house goes on the market. You said $810,000 is realistic. Trevor, I had to read it twice. Declining, memory care, house on the market. I clicked the next email, Andrea's reply. Trevor, November works. I'll prepare intake forms. For the home sale, I can refer a realtor. Meadowbrook's fee is $18,000 up front. Andrea. The third email was from yesterday. Andrea. Perfect. The old lady won't even know what hit her. Once she's in Meadowbrook, Melissa and I are free. House sells, we split the cash. I stared at the screen. The old lady won't even know what hit her. He was going to put me in a nursing home. Forged documents claim I had dementia, sell my house, Vincent's house, and pocket $800,000. And Melissa. Did she know? I grabbed my phone and started taking pictures. The Excel file, the email thread, every forged receipt. My hands steadied as I worked. 35 years of teaching had trained me to document everything. Then I crept downstairs to my office and printed 3 copies of every page. The printer's hum sounded deafening in the silent house, but Trevor's snoring never stopped. By 1:15 in the morning, I stood in the guest room doorway one last time, looking at the closed laptop. I picked up the 3 folders of evidence, and I whispered, "You picked the wrong teacher to mess with." Morning light filtered through the kitchen window, soft and golden. I sat at the table with a mug of black coffee, Vincent's old world's best teacher mug, and spread the 3 folders in front of me. My phone lay beside them, charged and ready. It was 7:30 on Saturday morning. The house was silent. Trevor and Melissa were still asleep upstairs, oblivious. I'd barely slept, but my mind was clear, sharper than it had been in months. I had evidence. Now I needed allies. I picked up the phone and dialed the first number. Philip Townsend answered on the second ring. "Diane, it's early. Everything okay?" Philip had been Vincent's colleague at Richmond High, taught government and civics for 40 years before retiring. We'd known each other 35 years, shared countless faculty dinners, watched our kids grow up together. After Vincent passed, Philip had handled the estate paperwork pro bono. Now he ran a small law practice downtown, mostly wills and real estate disputes. "Philip, I need your help," I said. "It's Trevor." His voice sharpened. "What did he do?" I told him. The $52,000 in credit card fraud, the forged signatures, the emails with Andrea Patterson at Meadowbrook Senior living the plan to put me in memory care, sell my house for $800,000, and split the money. The line went silent for a long moment. "Jesus, Diane." Philip's voice was tight with anger. "That's elder financial abuse. That's fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. This isn't a family squabble, this is criminal." "I have evidence," I said. "Emails, spreadsheets, forged receipts. I printed 3 copies." "Good, that's good." I heard him rustling papers. "Listen to me. We file Monday morning, 9 o'clock sharp. Restraining order fraud report to the police civil suit. I'll prepare everything this weekend. Can you come to my office Monday at 9? I'll be there. And Diane," his voice softened, "Vincent would be proud of you. You're doing the right thing." I hung up and stared at the folders. One down. I dialed the second number. "Rossi Security and Locks, this is Frank." I didn't know Frank Rossi personally, but his company had been around Richmond for decades. Vincent had used them once when we'd locked ourselves out during a thunderstorm. Frank had arrived in 20 minutes, picked the lock in 30 seconds, and refused to charge us more than $50. "Mr. Rossi, my name is Diane Fletcher. I need all my locks changed today. 4 locks, front door, back door, garage, and basement. Can you do it today?" He sounded surprised. "It's Saturday, ma'am. I'd normally schedule for Monday. I'll pay extra. This is urgent." A pause. "Okay, what's the address?" 847 Sycamore Street. "I can be there at 11. I'll bring high-security deadbolts best on the market. You're looking at about $1,200 for 4 locks plus 20 keys. That work, yuck hour." "That works. See you at 11, Mrs. Fletcher." I set the phone down. My hands were steady. At 9:30, I heard footsteps upstairs. Trevor's voice muffled, "Let's grab breakfast out. I'm sick of this place." A few minutes later, I watched from the window as they climbed into Trevor's car and pulled out of the driveway. Melissa didn't even glance back at the house. Good. They'd be gone for hours. Trevor liked long, expensive Saturday brunches. At exactly 11 o'clock, a white van pulled into the driveway. "Rossi Security and Locks," in bold red letters on the side. Frank Rossi climbed out, a stocky man in his 50s with a weathered face and a tool belt slung low on his hips. He carried a large metal case. "Mrs. Fletcher." He extended a calloused hand. "Frank Rossi, 28 years in the business. Let's take a look at what you've got." I showed him the 4 doors. He examined each lock, nodding thoughtfully. "These are builder grade," he said. "Wouldn't stop anyone determined. I'm going to put in grade 1 deadbolts, same ones we install for commercial properties. Military grade cylinders. Once these are in, nobody gets through without your say-so." He worked fast. By 12:15, all 4 locks were replaced, gleaming brass against the old wood. He handed me a key ring, heavy with 20 identical keys. "Keep a few, give a few to people you trust, stash the rest," he said. "And Mrs. Fletcher," he looked me in the eye, "I don't know what's going on, but if you're changing locks on a Saturday morning, somebody crossed a line. These'll hold. You're safe now." I shook his hand. "Thank you." He tipped an imaginary hat and drove away. At 12:30, Trevor's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the kitchen window as they climbed out, laughing, carrying shopping bags they didn't bother bringing inside. They had no idea everything had just changed. I closed my fist around the new keys and smiled. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. I pulled into the parking lot of Philip's law office at 10 to 9, clutching my leather briefcase, the same one I'd carried student essays in for 35 years. Inside were the 3 folders of evidence. The building was old red brick on Main Street, squeezed between a coffee shop and a dry cleaner. Philip's office was on the 2nd floor. I climbed the narrow stairs, each step echoing. Philip was waiting. His office smelled like old books and coffee. "Let's see what we've got." I spread the evidence across his desk. The Excel spreadsheet showing $52,800 in fraudulent charges. The forged receipts. The email thread with Andrea Patterson at Meadowbrook Senior Living Trevor's plan to put me in memory care and sell my house for $800,000. Philip read in silence, his jaw tightening. Finally, he looked up. "This is textbook elder financial abuse. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy. That email about placing you in a facility." He tapped the page. "Illegal confinement planning. We're filing a restraining order today, fraud report to Richmond PD and a civil suit." "What do I need to do?" He slid papers across the desk. "Sign these. Restraining order application. Power of attorney revocation. Fraud affidavit for the police. Civil complaint." I signed 7 documents, my hand steady. 35 years of grading papers had given me a strong signature, the real one, not Trevor's pathetic forgery. "Court hearing is Thursday, October 24th, Philip said. "The criminal case will take months, but legally, as of today, you're protected." "Thank you, Philip." He squeezed my hand. Vincent would have torn that kid apart. I'm just doing what he'd want. 3 hours later, I walked into Community First Bank on Broad Street. The branch manager, Patricia Hughes, met me in a private office. She was 51, sharp-eyed with gray hair pulled into a tight bun. "Mrs. Fletcher, you said this was urgent." I opened the briefcase and laid out the evidence. The Excel file. The forged receipts. $52,800 Trevor had stolen using my credit card. Patricia's expression shifted from professional to furious in seconds. "This is identity theft and credit card fraud." She picked up her phone. "I'm freezing this account immediately." She typed rapidly. "Fraud investigation starts today. You'll need to fill out dispute forms, but based on these forged signatures, the bank will issue a full refund. 60 days, maybe sooner." 60 days. Federal law requires investigation, but this is clear-cut. You'll have your money back. She handed me forms. "Sign here, here, and here. We'll also freeze any accounts with Trevor Dawson's name. He won't access anything." I signed. Patricia copied every document and filed them in a folder marked "Fraud Investigation Urgent." "Mrs. Fletcher, in 30 years of banking, I've seen this too many times. Family members stealing from elderly parents." She looked at me seriously. "You did the right thing. Most people are too scared to come forward." "I'm a retired teacher," I said. "I've dealt with worse than Trevor Dawson." She smiled. "I believe it." By 4 o'clock, I was driving home down Broad Street. The autumn sun hung low, casting long shadows. I pulled into the driveway of 847 Sycamore Street, the house Vincent and I had bought in 1990, the house where we'd raised Melissa, the house Trevor thought he could steal. I sat in the car looking at the front door with its new brass deadbolt. "This house is mine," I whispered. "No one's taking it." But I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Trevor and Melissa didn't know yet. Didn't know about the restraining order, the frozen accounts, the police report. They'd find out soon. And when they did, there'd be hell to pay. By the time I got home from the bank, it was 4 o'clock and the afternoon light was already fading. I stood in the basement looking at the 4 navy blue Samsonite suitcases Vincent and I had bought for a European trip we'd never taken. He'd gotten sick 2 weeks before departure. I carried them upstairs one by one, their wheels bumping against each step. They smelled like dust and mothballs. I set them in a row outside the guest room door and went inside. Trevor's side of the closet was packed designer suits. I knew he couldn't afford dress shirts still in dry cleaner plastic Italian leather shoes that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Melissa's side was simpler cotton dresses, cardigans, the kind of practical clothes elementary school teachers wore. I started with Trevor's things. 35 years of teaching had trained me to be methodical. I folded each suit jacket carefully layered tissue paper between the fabric to prevent wrinkles, not because I cared about Trevor's wardrobe, but because doing things right was who I was. The first suitcase filled quickly. Suits, dress shirts, ties in garish patterns, leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. The second suitcase was Melissa's. I lifted a blue cotton dress, the one she'd worn to Vincent's funeral 5 years ago. She'd stood beside me at the grave, holding my hand, whispering, "It's going to be okay, Mom, we'll be okay." When had she stopped believing that? I folded the dress and placed it in the suitcase. Then her sweaters, her jeans, her sensible flats, the clothes of the daughter I used to know before Trevor. The third suitcase held personal items, Melissa's makeup bag, Trevor's electric razor, a stack of paperback novels Melissa kept on the nightstand, romance books with cracked spines and dog-eared pages, a laptop charger, toiletries from the bathroom. The fourth suitcase was nearly full when I found it tucked in the back of Melissa's drawer, still wrapped in the tissue paper I'd used to gift it. A red cashmere scarf. I'd given it to her last Christmas. She'd tried it on spun in a circle, laughing. "It's perfect, Mom. I love it." She'd never worn it, not once. I held the scarf against my chest and closed my eyes. I saw Melissa at 8 years old running through the front door after school, waving a spelling test. Mom, look 100%. Mrs. Anderson said it was perfect. I saw her at 16 curled on this same bed crying over her first heartbreak. "Why doesn't he like me, Mom?" And I'd smoothed her hair and said, "Because he's a fool sweetheart. Someday you'll find someone who sees how amazing you are." I'd been wrong. She'd found Trevor instead. I folded the red scarf carefully and placed it on top of her clothes. "I'm not losing you to him, Melissa," I whispered. "Not if I can help it." I zipped all 4 suitcases and carried them to the foyer, lined them up in a neat row handles facing out, ready to be taken. Then I walked through the house one more time, checking every lock. Front door deadbolt secure, back door locked tight, garage latched, basement bolted. Frank Rossi's military-grade locks gleamed in the fading light. Nobody was getting in without my permission. I returned to the living room and sat on the worn leather sofa, the same spot where I'd been sitting 3 days ago, when Trevor yanked the TV cable from the wall. 3 days. That's all it had been. 72 hours since that black cable went slack in his hand, and I'd decided finally to stop being a victim. The 4 blue suitcases stood in the foyer like sentries. Outside, the October sun sank behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Shadows crept across the living room floor. The house grew dark around me, but I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the gathering darkness, waiting. Trevor and Melissa would be home soon. They had no idea what was waiting for them. No idea that the locks had been changed, that restraining orders had been filed, that their belongings were packed and ready to go. No idea that everything had changed. I folded my hands in my lap and waited for the sound of their car in the driveway. I heard the car first, the low rumble of Trevor's engine pulling into the driveway, then cutting off. 2 doors slammed, footsteps on the walkway, voices muffled. I stood up from the sofa where I'd been sitting in darkness, my heart steady. I'd been waiting for this. Through the front window, I could see their silhouettes under the porch light. Trevor carried shopping bags, probably charged to a card that was now frozen. Melissa walked beside him, arms wrapped against the October chill. Trevor reached the door and pulled out his keyring, the jangle of metal, the scrape of a key sliding toward the lock, then nothing. The key wouldn't go in. I watched his shadow through the frosted glass. He tried again, jiggling the key, forcing it. Frank Rossi's deadbolt wouldn't budge. "Trevor," Melissa's voice uncertain. "What's wrong?" "The damn key doesn't work." He tried again, more aggressive. Rattled the doorknob hard. Then he pounded the door. 3 heavy blows that shook the frame. "Diane, open this door." "What the hell did you do?" I stood 2 feet back, breathing slowly. Counting to 10 in my head, an old teacher's trick for staying calm when students melted down. Never react in anger. Never escalate. Stay in control. At 10, I stepped forward and unlocked the deadbolt, but I left the chain on. The door opened 6 inches enough to see out, not enough for anyone to push through. Trevor's face filled the gap, red, furious. Why did you change the locks? This is my house, too. You can't lock me out. Behind him, Melissa stood on the porch steps, clutching her coat. Her face was pale, eyes wide. She looked small, scared. My heart ached, but I kept my voice steady. This is my house, Trevor. My name is on the deed. My husband and I bought it in 1990. You've been a guest here for 6 months. Guest, I live here. Not anymore. His eyes narrowed. You can't do this. Melissa, tell her she can't do this. Melissa didn't move. She was staring at me through the 6-inch gap, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Doubt. Not in me. In him. Trevor, she said quietly. Maybe we should just... No. He slammed his palm against the door. This is insane. You'll what, Trevor? My voice cut through his shouting, cold, controlled. Threaten me, break down the door. There are cameras now, and the police have a file on you. He froze. What? I reached down where I'd placed one of the folders, pulled out a single sheet, the credit card statement showing $52,800 in fraudulent charges. I slid it through the gap. Trevor grabbed it. His eyes scanned the page. I watched color drain from his face. Where did you... How... Keep reading. Melissa stepped forward, leaning over his shoulder. I watched her eyes move down the page, saw the moment she registered the numbers, the dates, the amounts. Trevor. Her voice barely a whisper. What is this? He didn't answer. I slid another page through. An email. The one Trevor sent to Andrea Patterson at Meadowbrook Senior Living. The old lady won't even know what hit her. Once she's in Meadowbrook, Melissa and I are free. Melissa read it. Her hand went to her mouth. Oh my God, Trevor. Melissa, baby, listen, I can explain. Trevor reached for her, but she stepped back. You were going to put my mother in a nursing home. Her voice shook. You were going to sell her house. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. I kept my voice level, teacher mode. I have 3 folders of evidence, Melissa. $52,000 in credit card fraud over 7 months. Forged signatures, emails planning to have me committed. Your belongings are packed 4 suitcases in the foyer. Trevor's face went from red to white to purple. We need to talk, I said. But first you both need to see something. Behind them, the October drizzle had started fine and cold, turning the porch steps slick. Their breath came out in white clouds. Melissa's mascara started running in thin black streaks. She looked at me through the 6-inch gap, her voice small. Mom, what's going on? Trevor's eyes moved down the credit card statement line by line. I watched his face through the 6-inch gap, watched the color drain from red to white as the numbers sank in. $52,800. 7 months of charges. Louis Vuitton, Rolex, Morton's Steakhouse. All on my credit card. All with my forged signature. Melissa leaned closer, reading over his shoulder. Her hand flew to her mouth. Trevor, this can't be... You didn't... But I wasn't done. I slid the second page through the gap. The email from Trevor to Andrea Patterson at Meadowbrook Senior Living. The one with the subject line, Timeline for Placement. Melissa took it from Trevor's shaking hand and read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. The old lady won't even know what hit her. Once she's in Meadowbrook, Melissa and I are free. House sells, we split the cash, and I'm finally out of this dump. She looked up at Trevor, her eyes wide with horror. You were going to put my mother in a nursing home. Her voice cracked. You were going to sell her house. Melissa, baby, listen. Trevor reached for her, but she jerked away from him. Don't touch me. She held up the email, her hand trembling. You were planning this. For how long? How long have you been lying to me? It's not what it looks like. You forged her signature. Melissa's voice rose sharp and breaking. You stole $52,000 from my mother. You were going to lock her away and steal everything she has. I was doing it for us. Trevor's voice turned desperate. So we could have a future, so we could... You were doing it for yourself. She stumbled backward off the porch steps into the drizzle. Oh my God, what have you done? I kept my voice calm and steady through the gap. I filed a restraining order this morning, Trevor, at 9 o'clock at my lawyer's office. The police have been notified. So has the bank. Your access to my accounts is frozen. Community First is investigating every charge. Trevor's head snapped toward me. You can't. I already did. I continued, my voice even. Your belongings are packed. 4 blue suitcases in the foyer. Everything you brought into this house 6 months ago. You have 10 minutes to take them and leave my property. This is insane. Trevor's desperation turned to rage. You can't just throw me out. I'll sue you. You'll what? I asked calmly. Commit more fraud. Forge more documents. That's when the red and blue lights swept across the porch. I'd called 911 20 minutes ago before I'd even opened the door. Told them I had a restraining order being violated, a man refusing to leave my property. They'd said an officer was already in the area and would arrive shortly. 2 police cruisers pulled into the driveway, lights flashing but sirens silent. The first officer out was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with graying temples and a wedding ring. Officer Daniel Brooks, according to his name badge. 22 years on the Richmond PD, I'd learn later. He moved with the calm confidence of someone who'd handled 1,000 domestic situations. The second officer was younger, early 30s, lean and alert. Officer Marcus Fisher, 8 years on the force. He hung back slightly, one hand resting casually near his belt, watching Trevor's body language. Officer Brooks approached the porch, his flashlight beam cutting through the October drizzle. Evening, folks. His voice was professional neutral. We got a call about a disturbance at this address. Sir, ma'am. He looked at Trevor and Melissa. I'm going to need to see some identification. Mrs. Fletcher has filed a legal complaint, and we need to verify everyone's identity and residency status. Trevor stood frozen on the porch, still holding the credit card statement in his shaking hands. The paper was getting wet from the rain ink starting to blur. Melissa had sunk down onto the bottom porch step, her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. And I stood behind my door 6 inches open, chain lock secure, waiting to tell the police everything. Officer Brooks looked directly at Trevor. Mr. Dawson, according to the restraining order filed this morning, you must vacate these premises immediately. This property is owned solely by Mrs. Diane Fletcher, deed on record since 1990. You have no legal residency here. Trevor's face went white. But we live here. Not anymore, sir. Brooks's tone was firm. Mrs. Fletcher has the legal right to remove you. Collect your belongings and leave. Now. I unlocked the chain and opened the door fully all the way for the first time since they'd come home. The 4 navy blue suitcases stood in my foyer. I stepped aside and pointed. I've packed everything. Your clothes, personal items, toiletries. Nothing is missing. Melissa's eyes met mine for a second, then darted away. Her mascara had run in black streaks. She looked like a child caught doing something terrible. Trevor stared at the suitcases, then at me, then at Brooks. This is insane, he muttered, but there was no force behind it, just defeat. Sir, collect your belongings. Brooks gestured toward the foyer. Trevor walked past me, wouldn't meet my eyes, and grabbed 2 suitcases. His face was scarlet. The humiliation of it, being escorted out by police in front of the neighbors. And the neighbors were watching. Across the street, Dorothy Marshall stood on her porch in her cardigan, arms folded. She'd lived on Sycamore Street for 25 years. Everyone would know by tomorrow. Next door, Linda Sutton's curtain was pulled back. I could see her silhouette watching. 3 houses down, Russell Grant had stopped watering his roses entirely. He stood on his lawn hose, dangling, watching Trevor haul suitcases down my steps. Melissa picked up the other 2 suitcases, moving like someone in a nightmare. She wouldn't look at me, just stared at the ground, tears dripping. Melissa, I said softly. She flinched but didn't look up. I love you. That hasn't changed. But I won't let him destroy you, or me. She made a small broken sound and hurried down the steps after Trevor. Officer Fisher walked beside them to the driveway. Brooks stayed on the porch with me. Trevor popped the trunk. He and Melissa loaded the 4 suitcases, 2, 3, 4, slamming the lid shut. They climbed into the car without a word. The engine started, headlights flared. Trevor backed out of the driveway of 847 Sycamore Street. His taillights blinked red at the stop sign. Then he turned right and disappeared into the October night. Fisher returned to his cruiser. Brooks turned to me. "You did the right thing, ma'am. Any problems, call us, day or night." "Thank you." He nodded and walked to his car. Both cruisers pulled away, lights off, blending into the quiet neighborhood. I stood on the porch watching the empty street. Maple trees rustled. A dog barked somewhere. Then I stepped inside and closed the door, locked the deadbolt, fastened the chain. The house was silent, empty in a way it hadn't been in 6 months. I made it to the living room before my legs gave out. I sank onto the worn leather sofa, the same spot where this had started 3 days ago with a yanked TV cable, and my whole body started to shake. Not from fear, not from anger, from relief. 3 days passed. I heard nothing from Melissa. I called her cell 5 times on Wednesday, straight to voicemail. Thursday morning, I tried twice more. The phone rang and rang, then voicemail. I sent a text, "Honey, please call me back. I'm worried about you." No reply. By Friday morning, I was frantic. Was she okay? Was Trevor threatening her? Had he taken her phone away? I needed to know where they were. That's when I called Evelyn Parker. Evelyn and I had taught together at Richmond High for 15 years before she'd retired to spend more time with her grandkids. She was 63 now, sharp as ever, and had a knack for finding things out. When her daughter's ex-boyfriend had skipped town owing child support, Evelyn had tracked him down in 3 days, using nothing but Facebook and public records. "Give me an hour," she said when I explained the situation. An hour and 12 minutes later, she called back. 2134 Chamberlain Avenue, apartment 3B, Hillside Apartments, North Richmond near the old tobacco warehouses. It's not a nice area, Diane. I wrote it down. "Thank you, Evelyn." "Be careful," she said, "and call me if you need anything." Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I drove across town to Chamberlain Avenue. Hillside Apartments was a 4-story complex painted a faded yellow that might have been cheerful once, but now just looked dingy. The balconies were edged with rust. Half the parking lot was cracked asphalt sprouting weeds. Trevor's car was there 3rd row near the dumpsters. I sat in my car for 20 minutes staring up at the building. Apartment 3B would be on the 3rd floor. I counted windows trying to guess which one was theirs. But I didn't get out, didn't knock on their door. What would I even say Melissa had made her choice? For now, I drove home. Friday night at 8 o'clock, my phone finally rang. Melissa lit up the screen. I grabbed it. "Honey, are you okay?" "Mom," her voice was tired, flat. "I can't talk long. Trevor's in the shower." My heart sank. She only had minutes, maybe less. "I'm worried about you," I said carefully. "Are you safe?" "I'm fine, Mom." But she didn't sound fine. Trevor said, you overreacted. He said he was just trying to help you manage your finances, that you didn't understand. I closed my eyes. Of course, that's what he'd told her. Melissa listened to me. He stole $52,800 from my credit card over 7 months. He forged my signature on every receipt. That's not helping, that's fraud. That's elder abuse. Silence on the line. And the email to the nursing home. I continued keeping my voice steady. He was planning to have me declared incompetent, to sell my house, your childhood home. He was going to take everything. He said that email was taken out of context. Her voice was so small. He said it wasn't what it looked like. Melissa. I made my voice firm. Teacher voice. The one that cut through teenage excuses and got to the truth. You read the email. You saw the credit card statement. You know what he did. Deep down, I heard her breath hitch. She was crying. I don't know what to believe anymore, Mom. I'm so confused. I need time to think. Honey. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. Call ended. Whether she'd hung up or Trevor had come out of the shower and grabbed the phone, I didn't know. I sat at the kitchen table, still holding the phone, and my eyes fell on the photo I kept on the windowsill. The 3 of us at the Grand Canyon in 2010. Melissa was 21, fresh out of college, her whole life ahead of her. Vincent had his arm around both of us, grinning at the camera. We looked so happy, so whole. I picked up the frame and traced my finger over Melissa's face. "I won't give up on you, baby," I whispered to the photo. "I promise." The sound of shattering glass woke me at 2:30 in the morning. I bolted upright in bed, heart hammering. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed it. Then I heard it again, the violent crash of breaking glass, the splintering crack of wood. Downstairs, someone was in my house. I grabbed my phone and ran to the hallway, flipping on every light. The staircase flooded with brightness. At the bottom, I froze. Trevor was in my backyard, visible through what used to be my living room window. He held an aluminum baseball bat in one hand and a crowbar in the other. The window frame was destroyed, jagged shards of glass hung like broken teeth. My curtains flapped wildly in the cold October wind. He was using the crowbar to pry at the back door metal, screeching against wood. And he was drunk. I could tell from the way he swayed. A whiskey bottle lay on its side in the grass, amber liquid soaking into the lawn. "Trevor," I shouted. He spun around, eyes wild and unfocused. His face was flushed, dark red hair, sticking up shirt half untucked. "This is my house," he screamed, brandishing the bat. "You can't just throw me out, I live here." My hands shook as I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "A man is vandalizing my property at 847 Sycamore Street. He's my son-in-law, violating a restraining order. He has a baseball bat and a crowbar. Officers are on the way, ma'am. Stay inside." I kept the phone to my ear and moved closer to the broken window, but not too close. Trevor lurched forward, stumbling over the bottle. "You ruined everything. Diane, Melissa, and I had a plan. We were going to be free." "Your plan," I said, voice shaking but clear, "was to steal $52,000 from me and lock me in a nursing home. That's fraud and elder abuse. You're a bitter old woman." He swung the bat at nothing. "You couldn't stand to see us happy. I couldn't stand to see my daughter manipulated by a thief." Something twisted in his face. He turned and swung the bat with both hands at what remained of the window. The last section exploded inward. Shards skittered across my hardwood floor, glittering under the lights. Then I heard sirens. Red and blue lights swept across the yard. Trevor's head snapped around. He froze, then he ran. He took off through my backyard toward the fence, still clutching the bat. Officer Marcus Fisher came sprinting around the house and tackled Trevor from behind before he'd made it 10 feet. The bat flew from Trevor's hand and clattered across my patio. Trevor hit the ground hard, Fisher's knee in his back. "Hands behind your back. Don't resist." The handcuffs clicked. Officer Brooks appeared at my front door, flashlight in hand. He looked tired, second time. In a week, he'd been here for the same man. "Mrs. Fletcher, are you hurt?" "No, just shaken." He stepped inside, surveying the damage. "You'll need to file charges for vandalism and violating the restraining order." "I will." Outside, Fisher marched Trevor to the patrol car. Trevor was shouting something incoherent. They pushed him into the back. Same car, same seat, second time in 5 days. Brooks came back with his clipboard, writing quickly. "Vandalism, trespassing, violating a restraining order, second offense." He looked up. "He'll be held overnight. Arraignment tomorrow morning." Given the violation and property damage, the judge won't be lenient. "Thank you, officer." He nodded. "Call a glass repair company in the morning." The cruiser pulled away, Trevor's face pressed against the window. I stood alone in my living room. Broken glass covered the floor. Cold wind poured through the shattered frame. The aluminum bat lay on my patio, evidence of how close I'd come to something much worse. I sank into a chair, pulled my robe tighter, and let the exhaustion wash over me. By 5 in the morning, I'd given up on sleep. I came downstairs in my bathrobe and swept up the broken glass, filling 2 garbage bags with glittering shards. Then I taped flattened Amazon boxes over the shattered window frame. They flapped in the October wind, but kept out the cold. The house felt violated. Even with all the lights on, I kept glancing at that covered window. At 8 o'clock, my phone rang. Philip. "Diane, Trevor was arraigned this morning. Bail's been set at $5,000. I sank into a kitchen chair. $5,000, that's all. For vandalism and a second restraining order violation, unfortunately, yes. But the fraud case is moving forward. The bank confirmed they're investigating the full $52,800. Federal fraud charges are on the table. And the restraining order, hearings Thursday, October 29th. With 2 documented violations, the judge will make it permanent. He won't be able to come near you again." "Thank you, Philip." I hung up and stared at the cardboard window. My phone buzzed. A text from Officer Brooks. Thought you should know your daughter posted bail for Trevor Dawson at 11:30 this morning. Released with ankle monitor, no contact, cannot come within 500 feet of your address. Stay safe. I read it 3 times. Melissa had bailed him out. Used her savings, her teacher's salary savings, to free the man who'd stolen from me, planned to lock me away, smashed my window with a baseball bat at 2:30 in the morning. I called her number, straight to voicemail. I tried again, voicemail. I sent a text, Melissa, please call me. I'm worried about you. The message showed delivered, but not read. I waited 20 minutes staring at my phone. Nothing. At 2 o'clock, a white van pulled into my driveway. Richmond glass and security painted on the side. A man in his 40s climbed out with a clipboard. Mrs. Fletcher, Tom Brennan. Frank Rossi sent me. I showed him the cardboard patch job. He whistled low. Baseball bat? How did you know? Pattern of damage. Seen it before. He measured the frame. I'll install tempered safety glass, takes a lot more force to break. Frank said you wanted an alarm system. Yes, every window and door. Smart move. He worked fast. By 4:30, a new double-pane window was installed. Then he spent another hour installing motion sensors on every window and door, a control panel, and a wireless panic button for my nightstand. Systems monitored 24/7, he explained. Any door or window opens when armed police are dispatched. Average response time here is under 5 minutes. Panic button goes straight to 911. How much? He checked his clipboard. Safety glass window is $650. Alarm system with 12 months monitoring is $1,200. Totals $1,850. I wrote the check. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out all the invoices from the past week. Frank Rossi's locks, $1,200. Tom Brennan's repairs and alarm, $1,850. Total, $3,050. $3,050. The price of keeping myself safe in the home Vincent and I had bought 35 years ago. I thought about Melissa somewhere across town with Trevor wearing an ankle monitor, probably still blaming me, my daughter. The little girl I'd rocked to sleep, who'd cried on her first day of kindergarten, who'd made me construction paper Mother's Day cards. And she'd chosen him. I folded the receipts and put them in a folder labeled Trevor Legal. Then I sat alone in my newly secured house and let myself cry. My phone rang at 9:15 p.m. Melissa's name lit up the screen. I grabbed it. Melissa, Mom. Her voice was barely a whisper, thick with tears and terror. Help me. Please. Then I heard Trevor in the background, his voice a roar that made my stomach drop. Give me that phone. Ni signor amar. A scuffle. Something heavy hitting the floor. Melissa cried out a sharp, pain-filled sound that cut through me like broken glass. The line went dead. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I dialed 911, fingers trembling. 911, what's your emergency? My daughter is being attacked by her husband at 2134 Chamberlain Avenue, apartment 3B, domestic violence. She just called me. I heard him hit her. Please send someone now. Officers are being dispatched, ma'am. Stay on the... I hung up and grabbed my car keys. I ran to the garage, started the engine, and tore out of the driveway so fast the tires squealed on the pavement. The dashboard clock read 9:17. 4.2 miles. Normally 15 minutes in evening traffic. I made it in 7. I ran every yellow light. Flew down empty streets at 50 miles an hour, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The October night was dark and cold streetlights casting long shadows across Chamberlain Avenue. My mind raced with images I didn't want to see Melissa hurt, bleeding alone. I pressed harder on the gas. At 9:22, I screeched into the parking lot of Hillside Apartments. I left the car running driver's door open and sprinted toward the building. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. My lungs burned as I took the stairs 2 at a time. My shoulder ached from an old injury, but I didn't slow down. Each step felt like forever. Each second mattered. I reached 3B and pounded on the door with both fists. Melissa opened the door. Silence. I pounded again, harder. Melissa, nothing. I backed up 3 steps, braced myself, and rammed my shoulder into the door as hard as I could. Pain shot through my arm, sharp and hot. The door shuddered but held. I backed up again, ran at it, slammed my shoulder into the cheap particle board wood with everything I had, ignoring the screaming pain. This time the lock gave. The door flew inward, banging against the wall. I stumbled into the apartment and froze. Melissa was sitting on the floor in the corner of the tiny living room, her back pressed against the wall. Her lip was split open red, trickling down her chin onto her shirt. Her left cheek was already swelling, turning dark purple. Her eyes were wide with fear. Trevor stood in the center of the room, holding a broken beer bottle by the neck. The jagged glass caught the overhead light. His face was flush, dark red eyes, wild and unfocused. The apartment reeked of stale beer and sweat. He turned when I burst in. "Get out of my apartment!" He snarled, his words slurred. I didn't hesitate. I stepped between him and Melissa, my body a shield. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady. "Get away from her. This is none of your business, old woman. I'm making it my business." My voice didn't shake. 64 years of teaching had taught me how to stare down bullies, how to project authority even when terrified. "You touch her again and I swear..." "You swear what?" He took a step toward me, the bottle-raised arm trembling with rage or alcohol or both. I didn't move. I planted my feet and met his eyes. Behind me, Melissa whispered, "Mom, please." "It's okay, baby," I said, not taking my eyes off Trevor. "It's going to be okay." Then I heard it, footsteps thundering up the stairs, heavy, fast, purposeful. The door, already hanging on broken hinges, was shoved fully open. Officer Daniel Brooks appeared in the doorway, Officer Marcus Fisher right behind him. Both had their hands on their belts, eyes taking in everything instantly. The broken door, Trevor, with the jagged bottle, Melissa on the floor with her split lip and swelling face. Me standing between them. Brooks's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Sir, drop the bottle right now. If you're still here, comment 12 so I know you're standing with me, and tell me if it were you facing that moment, what would you do? Because what happens next changes everything." Please note the next part includes some dramatized elements created for storytelling and educational purposes. If this style isn't for you, "Everyone step back," Brooks commanded, his voice filling the small apartment. "Drop the bottle now." Trevor's eyes darted between Brooks, Fisher, and me. For a second, I thought he might swing the jagged glass. His hand tightened around the bottle's neck. "Drop it!" Brooks repeated, his tone, leaving no room for negotiation. The bottle clattered to the floor glass, skittering across cheap linoleum. Trevor raised both hands, palms out. She called this as... Officer Fisher moved fast. He grabbed Trevor's wrists, twisted them behind his back, and snapped handcuffs into place before Trevor could finish stammering. "Trevor Dawson." Fisher said, his voice flat and professional. "You're under arrest for domestic violence assault with a deadly weapon and violating a restraining order, second offense." He began reciting the Miranda rights as he guided Trevor toward the door. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Brooks stepped past me and knelt beside Melissa. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Can you tell me what happened?" But Melissa wasn't looking at him. She was looking at me, tears streaming down her bruised face. I dropped to my knees and pulled her into my arms. "I'm so sorry, Mom." Her voice was thick with tears and shame. "I should have listened to you. I should have..." "Shh, it's okay. You're safe now. He said he loved me." She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "He said he'd change. He promised he'd get help, and I believed him. I'm so stupid." "You're not stupid." I pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes, my hands on her shoulders. "You're not stupid, Melissa. You're a victim. Abusers lie. That's what they do. They manipulate. They promise to change. And then they hurt you again. It's not your fault." She collapsed against me, crying into my shoulder the way she had when she was 8 years old and her goldfish died. Brooks stood and spoke quietly into his radio. "We need an ambulance at 2134 Chamberlain Avenue, apartment 3B. Victim of domestic assault, conscious and breathing. Visible injuries to the face." 10 minutes later, a woman in a dark blue EMT uniform knocked on the broken door frame and stepped inside, medical bag in hand. She was about 50 with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. "I'm Maria," she said, gently kneeling beside us. "I'm a paramedic. Can I take a look at you, honey?" Melissa nodded, pulling away from me reluctantly. Maria worked quickly and efficiently, checking Melissa's pupils with a small flashlight, gently probing her cheekbone, examining the split lip. "Your lip is going to need stitches, probably 3. Your cheek is badly bruised, but the bone isn't broken. Can you take a deep breath for me?" Melissa inhaled shakily. "Does that hurt?" "A little, on the left side." Maria pressed gently along Melissa's ribs. "Bruised, but I don't feel any fractures. You're going to be sore for a few days. I'd like to take you to the hospital for x-rays and to get that lip stitched up properly." Melissa looked at me. "Will you come with me?" "Of course, baby. I'm not leaving you." Outside, I heard Fisher's voice. "Watch your head, sir." I looked through the broken doorway and saw them loading Trevor into the back of the patrol car for the 3rd time in 2 weeks. His face was pressed against the window, eyes locked on Melissa. "You'll regret this," he shouted through the glass. "You hear me, Melissa? You'll regret this." Fisher slammed the door, cutting off his voice. Brooks appeared beside me. "That's witness intimidation. We'll add it to the charges." "How many charges is that now?" I asked. "For tonight alone. Domestic violence, assault with a deadly weapon, violating a restraining order, 2nd offense, and now witness intimidation. Combined with the previous fraud charges and the vandalism from last week," he shook his head, "he's looking at serious prison time." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the back of an ambulance holding Melissa's hand as the EMTs prepared to transport her to Richmond General. Through the small window, I watched the city lights blur past, street lamps, neon signs, the dark shapes of buildings against the night sky. Melissa's fingers tightened around mine. "I'm scared, Mom." "I know, but you're safe now. For the first time in 8 months, you're really safe." She closed her eyes, tears still leaking from the corners. I thought about the journey ahead, the hospital, the police reports, the court hearings, the restraining orders, the divorce proceedings, the long, slow work of healing. The legal battle was just beginning, but my daughter was alive, and she was free, and that was enough. 3 months passed like pages turning in a book I'd been too afraid to read. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed Trevor's file. I sat in the front row, Melissa beside me, both of us watching as Judge Carolyn Hughes adjusted her reading glasses. Elder financial abuse, fraud totaling $52,800, domestic violence, assault with a deadly weapon, violation of a restraining order twice. Judge Hughes looked at Trevor over the bench. "Mr. Dawson, you exploited a 64-year-old woman's trust, forged her signature, plotted to have her committed, and assaulted your wife. This court finds your actions reprehensible." She sentenced him to 4 years in state prison and 10 years of supervised probation upon release. He had to repay the $52,800 in fraudulent charges, plus $5,000 in legal fees. A permanent no-contact order barred him from ever contacting Melissa or me again. Trevor's face was blank as the bailiff led him away. Melissa squeezed my hand. Melissa moved back into her old room, the same lavender walls, the same bookshelf filled with Harry Potter and Steinbeck. It felt like going back in time, except now she was 36 and learning to sleep without flinching. She started therapy twice a week with Dr. Ellen Richardson, a family trauma specialist, who helped her recognize manipulation and rebuild self-worth. Melissa filed for divorce in mid-December. By January, it was finalized. After 6 weeks of medical leave, she returned to teaching. Her principal, Margaret Foster, had kept her classroom waiting. The kids made her a welcome back banner. One night, Melissa showed me a photo on her phone, her 3rd graders holding the banner, grinning. She cried, but this time it was relief. I couldn't stop thinking about the other women out there, women who'd been targeted by their own family members, gaslit and stolen from, and told they were overreacting. So I started a group. I called it the Elder Abuse Survivors Network. We met every Wednesday evening at the Richmond Public Library in a small meeting room on the 2nd floor. The first meeting had 8 people. Dorothy Marshall, my 71-year-old neighbor, came. So did Linda Sutton, 58, who'd lost $30,000 to a nephew's investment scam. Evelyn Parker, the retired teacher who'd helped me find Trevor's apartment, joined too. We shared stories, we cried, we strategized. By the end of January, we had a phone hotline and a website. Melissa found a studio apartment 3 blocks from her school, a cozy space with hardwood floors and a bay window. She painted the walls pale yellow, hung plants, bought secondhand furniture from a thrift store. She was rebuilding herself piece by piece. She still came over twice a week for dinner. We'd sit at the kitchen table, the same table where Vincent and I used to grade papers and talk about her students, her therapy sessions, the future she was starting to believe in again. One evening, she looked at me across the table and said, "Mom, I don't think I ever thanked you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me." I reached across and took her hand. "I'm your mother, Melissa. I'll never give up on you." I sat in the library meeting room on a Wednesday night listening to a 72-year-old woman named Ruth describe how her son had drained her retirement account. Around the circle, heads nodded, hands reached out, tissues were passed. I looked at Dorothy, at Linda, at Evelyn. I thought about Melissa safe in her new apartment. I thought about Trevor locked in a cell where he couldn't hurt anyone. And I realized this wasn't just my victory. It was ours. All of us. A Friday evening in early February 2026, just past 7 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Melissa standing on the porch holding 2 white paper bags that smelled like garlic and ginger. "Hi, Mom," she said, smiling. "I brought dinner." We sat at the kitchen table, the same scarred oak table where Vincent and I had graded papers for 35 years and unpacked the containers. General Tso's chicken, fried rice, spring rolls, Vincent's favorites. It had been nearly 4 months since Trevor yanked that TV cable. 4 months since everything fell apart and then slowly came back together. Melissa looked healthier now. The bruises were long gone. Her eyes were brighter. She laughed more easily. "So," she said, pouring herself a glass of water, "I have news." "Good news, I hope." "Very good. I got promoted. Starting next school year, I'm going to be assistant principal." I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Melissa, that's wonderful. Your father would be so proud of you." Her smile wavered for just a moment. I wish he could have seen it. He knows, honey. Wherever he is, he knows. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of silence that only comes when you've been through hell together and made it out the other side. Then Melissa glanced over at the living room, the worn leather sofa, the television, the black cable coiled neatly beside the remote. "That cable," she said softly. "That's where it all started, wasn't it?" I followed her gaze. Yes. One small act of control. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the moment I decided to stop being afraid. "I'm glad you did." Her voice was quiet. "If you hadn't—" "But I did," I said firmly. "And that's what matters." I set down my fork and looked at her. "Melissa, I want you to understand something. Age doesn't make us weak. It gives us wisdom. It gives us experience. It gives us the strength to fight when we need to." She nodded, eyes glistening. I thought about that night standing in the guest room at midnight, opening Trevor's laptop, finding the spreadsheets and the emails. I thought about calling Philip, calling Frank Rossi, changing the locks. I thought about the restraining order, the fraud evidence, the police arriving at Chamberlain Avenue. I thought about the moment I broke down that apartment door and saw my daughter's face bruised and terrified. "Vincent," I thought, "if you could see this now, you'd know I protected our family. I kept my promise." I reached across the table and took Melissa's hand. "If anyone out there is reading this story, I said not to Melissa, but to whoever might be listening, and you see yourself in it, please don't stay silent. Don't wait. Call a lawyer. Call the police. Protect yourself. It's never too late to stand up." Melissa squeezed my hand. "You saved my life, Mom." "No, honey, you saved your own life. I just gave you the tools." At 10 o'clock, Melissa hugged me at the door, a long, tight hug that felt like forgiveness and gratitude and love all wrapped into one. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me. I never will." I stood on the porch and watched her car pull away, the red taillights disappearing down Sycamore Street. The bare branches of winter still framed the street, but spring was coming. I could feel it. Inside the house was warm. The light from the living room spilled out onto the porch, golden and welcoming. I walked back inside and locked the door, Frank Rossi's military-grade deadbolt sliding smoothly into place. The leather sofa, the bay window, the kitchen table, the photographs on the walls. This house at 847 Sycamore Street was mine, Vincent's and mine. And it always would be. Looking back, I realize my story isn't unique. It's one of thousands of family drama stories that happen every day. Stories where trust is broken, where love is weaponized, where silence becomes complicity. I was a 64-year-old retired teacher who thought I'd seen everything, but I hadn't seen this coming. I hadn't imagined my own son-in-law would forge my signature steal over $50,000 and plot to have me committed to a nursing home so he could sell my home. But here's what I learned: don't be like me. Don't wait. Don't convince yourself that things will get better on their own. When you see the warning signs, when someone tries to control the small things, criticizes your decisions, isolates you from friends, act immediately. Call a lawyer. Call the police. Document everything. These family drama stories aren't just entertainment, they're cautionary tales about what happens when we stay silent. My biggest lesson, age, is not weakness. I spent decades teaching teenagers to think critically, to question authority, to stand up for themselves. Yet when it came to my own life, I hesitated. I told myself I was too old, too tired, too afraid of causing trouble. That hesitation almost cost me everything. The lesson I want to pass on is this: you are never too old to fight back. Your years give you wisdom, experience, and the moral authority to say no. God gave us discernment for a reason. When Vincent used to say, "When someone tries to control the small things, they're hiding something big," he was echoing a truth I now believe came from a higher place. We're meant to protect ourselves and those we love. We're meant to stand firm. If you're reading this and thinking, "This sounds like one of those grandma stories that could never happen to me," please reconsider. Elder financial abuse affects 1 in 10 Americans over 65. These grandma stories are real. They happen to educated people, to former professionals, to people who thought they were too smart to be fooled. I was one of them. And sadly, these grandma stories are becoming more common as family drama stories continue to rise across the country. So here's my advice: if you're in a similar situation, don't wait for a TV cable to be yanked. Don't wait for a confrontation. Act now. Join a support group. Tell someone you trust. File a report. And if you're a younger person reading this, check on the elders in your life. Intervention can change everything. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there make a different choice, a braver choice than I almost made. A final word: this content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the lessons and messages are entirely valuable. If this style isn't right for you, that's okay. Please seek content that better fits your needs.